Behind that unmoving face, I can tell you exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking about the regulation on abandonment of a fallen man, which does not exist, because there is no such regulation. There is no clause in the Keldrath 1st Regiment standing orders that permits guardsmen to leave a living comrade on a mountain and descend alone. I had read every page of those orders. Twice. The way you read something when you suspect one day you will need it to hold a wall. Major Dern did not know that when he gave me the order. He was 300 meters below the cloud line, in a heated operations tent, with a radio and a cup of something warm. I was at 4,200 meters, kneeling beside Corporal Daventrell, who had a broken ankle and a fractured wrist, and was beginning to say things that made no sense. That is called altitude sickness compounding shock. I had seen it before. I knew what it meant, and I knew what came after it if you left a man alone. Let me take you back to the beginning of that day. 4 hours earlier, the joint winter exercise had been running for 2 days. The Keldrath 1st and a detachment from the Crestfall Mountain Corps, 8 men total, moving in 2 rope teams up the eastern face of the Crestfall Ridge, not a combat operation. A training ascent, the kind of thing that looks like routine until the mountain decides it isn't. I was paired with Treffel, who had been in the regiment for 3 years, and was without question the strongest technical climber in our section, the kind of man who made the rope feel like a formality. I had climbed behind him all morning watching him read the ice the way some men read a room, ahead always 1 move out. We were 2 rope lengths below the secondary col when the snow gave. It was not a dramatic thing. There was no crack, no groan, no warning you could point to afterward and say, there. One moment Trell's front points were planted and his axe was swung and he was moving cleanly, and then the shelf he had weighted simply peeled away in a sheet about a meter wide, and he was gone. Dropping fast, swinging left, and the rope snapped taut between us with a force that drove my planted axe halfway out of the ice before the anchor I had set below held. I held him. He pendulumed into the face and hit it hard, left side, ankle and wrist, taking the brunt of it. I could hear it. You know that sound. I did not say anything because there was nothing useful to say. I started moving down the rope toward him. By the time I reached him, he was conscious and swearing quietly, which I took as a good sign. The ankle was wrong. The angle of the boot told me everything. The wrist had taken the axe handle impact, and he was gripping it against his chest. I got him onto a small ledge, got his pack off, and started building the anchor. The cloud had dropped in the last 20 minutes. The wind was picking up from the northwest, which at that altitude in late autumn meant we had perhaps 90 minutes before conditions on the face became non-survivable without shelter. I got on the radio. Major Dern's voice came back calm and clipped. He had already lost radio contact with the lead rope team, who had gone over the col ahead of us and were presumably sheltering on the far side. The weather reading at base was deteriorating fast. He told me to assess whether Trell could be moved. I told him no. The ankle would not hold a descent. Moving him without a litter on that face in the coming wind was not a medical decision. It was a death sentence. There was a pause. Then Dern said what he said. Hayne, mark his position and descend. The mountain rescue unit is 6 hours out. Mark the position and get yourself off the face. 6 hours. The temperature at that altitude, in that wind, without movement, without the ability to stamp feet or swing arms, with shock already setting in. I did not do the arithmetic out loud because Trell was right beside me and he was still lucid enough to hear it. I keyed the radio. Sir, request permission to shelter in place and hold until rescue arrives. Dern's voice came back harder. Negative, Corporal. Mark the position and descend. That is a direct order. I held the radio for a moment. The wind was finding the gap between my collar and my balaclava, and I was as aware of it the way you are aware of a clock ticking. Not unpleasant yet, but counting. Here is the thing about a direct order. I had been trained since the first week of basic that a direct order from a superior officer is not a suggestion. It is the structure that makes any unit function. I believe that completely. I believed it then. I believe it now. Without that structure, you have nothing. Not a regiment, not a line, not a post. You have 8 men on a mountain making individual decisions, and 8 individual decisions on a mountain in a storm is how 8 men die. But there is a clause, not in the standing orders, because it does not appear there, but in something older than the standing orders, that says a guardsman does not leave a living man to die when he has the means to prevent it. That clause is not written down anywhere. It does not need to be. It is the reason the regiment exists. I keyed the radio again. Sir, I am unable to comply. Corporal Trell is non-ambulatory and will not survive a 6-hour wait at this altitude without shelter and monitoring. I am establishing a bivouac at this position. I am requesting that you log this refusal and dispatch rescue as quickly as conditions allow. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I thought the radio had failed. Then Dern said, very quietly, "Noted. Corporal. Logged." And that was the last transmission for 4 hours. I want to be precise about what the next 6 hours looked like, because I think people imagine it as something cinematic, two men fighting a mountain, dramatic gusts, heroic speeches. It was not that. It was small and methodical, and for long stretches of it, very quiet. I pulled the emergency bivouac sheet from Trell's pack and got it rigged between two anchor points on the ledge, low enough to break the wind without trapping moisture. I got him into his sleeping bag from the waist down. The ankle made full entry impossible, and layered my own insulation over the top half of him. I kept my base layers on. I kept moving. Every 12 minutes I talked to him. Not comfort, not reassurance. Just, "Trell, what's your name?" Full name, rank, and regiment. And he would answer. When the answers came back right, we were fine. When they started to drift, when he said once, around the 3rd hour, that he thought we were back in the transits barracks at Keldrath, and did I want to get something to eat? I put my hand on his sternum and I said his name once sharply, and I made him say it back to me. Rank, regiment, current location. He said the name of the mountain. That was enough. I did not allow myself to think about warmth, because warmth was not available, and thinking about it was a waste of capacity I needed elsewhere. I thought about the anchor points. I thought about the bivouac sheet and the way the wind was loading it on the left side, and whether the left anchor would hold. I thought about the 12-minute cycle. I thought about nothing else. Around the 4th hour, Trell asked me why I was still there. I told him I was fulfilling my duty. He said that was a very formal answer. I told him it was a very formal situation. He laughed. It was a short, tight laugh that cost him something in the ribs, and he stopped quickly, but it was real. I noted it the way you note a good anchor placement, solid, reliable, something to trust. The 5th hour was the worst. The temperature had dropped to the point where my hands, inside the gloves, were losing fine motor function. I started flexing them on a count. 10 seconds open, 10 seconds closed. Every time I checked the anchors. Trell had gone quiet in a way I did not like, and I talked more than I had in the previous hours, not asking him questions but telling him things about the regiment, about the standard on the flagpole at the Keldrath South Gate, about what the forecourt looks like at first parade in winter when the frost is still on the stones, and every man's breath hangs in the air. I do not know why I chose that. It was simply what was there, behind the unmoving face I had worn for 4 years, the world I knew when everything else was stripped away. "Oh," he said without opening his eyes, "you really love that place." I said, "It is my post." He said, "Same thing, isn't it?" I thought about that for a while. The rescue team arrived at 17 minutes past 6 in the morning. First light was just finding the upper snowfield when I heard the approach. 3 men from the Crestfall Mountain Corps, the right equipment, a proper litter, a medic. They came up fast and clean, and they knew what they were doing, and I moved out of their way immediately and let them work. The medic did his assessment. Trell was cold but responsive, vitals acceptable, the ankle what it was. The medic looked up at me and said, "You two were here all night?" I said we had been. He looked at the bivouac setup, the rigged sheet, the anchor points, the layered insulation. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Good work." I noted it the way I note everything, briefly, and then moved on. They packaged Trell for the descent. He was awake and clear-eyed by the time they had him strapped, the altitude sickness breaking as the medic got fluids into him. Before they started moving him, he looked up at me and he said my name. Just my name. The way a man says another man's name when words are not the right instrument. I told him to keep his eyes on the medic and not move his ankle. He almost smiled. "Still giving orders." "Someone has to," I said. "The descent took 2 hours." I walked down behind the team carrying nothing except my axe and the radio and whatever it was I had carried through the night, which does not have a name exactly, but which sat behind the sternum the way cold does. Present, settled, part of the structure. Major Dern met us at the base of the approach. He did not say anything to me at first. He oversaw Trell's transfer to the medical team, spoke to the rescue unit leader, reviewed the log. Then he came and stood beside me. He said, "You disobeyed a direct order, Corporal." I said, "Yes, sir," he said. "I've logged the refusal and I'll be submitting a full report," I said. "Yes, sir." He looked at the mountain for a moment. The cloud had lifted with the morning, and the upper face was clean in the new light. The ledge invisible from here, just another crease in the ice. He said, "Trell is alive." I said, "Yes, sir." He did not say anything else. He walked back toward the operations tent. I watched him go. I have thought about that night many times in the years since. Not the cold, not the hours, not the weight of the decision. Those things are simply what happened. I think about the moment on the radio when Dern's voice came back and said noted, and then the channel went silent. and what it felt like to be alone on that ledge, with nothing but the anchor, the bivouac sheet, the 12-minute cycle, and the certainty that the thing I was doing was correct, not comfortable, not safe, not in accordance with the order I had been given, but correct. There is a difference between those things. A guardsman learns it if he lasts long enough or he doesn't last. The uniform is not the discipline. The post is not the duty. The order is not always the same as the right thing, and knowing the difference, knowing it in your bones when the wind is cutting and the temperature is falling and a man beside you is starting to drift, that is not something they can put in the standing orders because you cannot legislate it. You can only build it slowly over years out of the same material everything else is made of. I served 14 more years in the Keldrath first. I never spoke about that night publicly, and I was never asked to. Trell made captain, his ankle healed clean. We served together twice more before his posting to the Eastern Detachment, and we had the habit, when we were in the same room at the end of a difficult day, of not needing to say very much. That is a thing you earn on a mountain at 4 in the morning, when the answers are still coming back right. The major's report was filed. The refusal is in the record. I was not disciplined. I assume the mountain is still there.